The first round of the NHL Draft is this Friday, and the Avs currently hold the 24th overall pick. So we all picked one of our favorite prospects for the Avs at 24. Really should have a cavalcade of options, but we're going to narrow it down to 3 for you here. Starting with AJ. What's your pick, AJ?
All right. If I told you that there was a 6'3" right shot defenseman that moved well, had good offensive skills, was really, really good defensively, was physically mature, and played professional hockey last year, would you be into that archetype? Just that alone? Would you be into that?
Yes.
Does that sound like something that would intrigue you?
I'll play along and say yes.
So I don't understand why there hasn't been more conversation about Dominika Badinka, the Czech player playing in Sweden. I'm confused about it. I watch him play and I'm like, this guy's really good. Why is Stein Solberg getting the love just because he's ultra physical and he's good defensively? This guy doesn't have the same kinds of question marks offensively. He's not ever going to run a power play. He's not going to score 40 points for you. Probably. But you are talking about a guy that the defensive side of his game is already the best aspect. He's good in transition. He's a decent skater. It's not great. And I think that's probably where people kind of get meh on him, is that there isn't anything about his game that is overwhelming that you look at and that jumps off the ice and says, this guy's elite. This guy's going to be special. And you look at some of the other guys in that range, a Solberg or a Charlie Elick, EJ Emery. They're huge. They're really physical. They're wonderful skaters. And there isn't any of that kind of hyperbole that you would attach to Badinka's game. It's just all solid. It's good. And the hockey IQ is really high. And I think that's why he ended up playing so many games in the SHL this past season. You talk about a really smart player whose game is best, again, in the defensive zone, but with a quality offensive game. It's not overwhelming, but a quality offensive game, and the way that he reads the ice, to me, it looks like a really good Avalanche defenseman.
Certainly checks a lot of the boxes. Other than the high-end skating.
Yeah, he's not the high-end skater. It needs to be worked on. But it's not also... we look at some of the guys in this class, they have clunky skating. It's awkward.
For sure.
You wonder, how is this going to get better? They have to rebuild their stride. You know? And with Badinka, I just don't think that is the case. I think it can continue to be improved upon without a ground floor up rebuilding of all of it, of the mechanics of it. And the way that he reads the ice, we see in Devon Toews, a player who doesn't have overwhelming physical skills, but is very smart. And you read the game at a high enough level, all the other attributes go up. Yep. I don't think that this kid is going to be Devon Toews, but he's got great size. He is the rarer of the shots. And I look at him and I think that this is the guy that everybody is sleeping on in this draft class, and I would love to see him be an Av on draft day.
When you talk about the well-roundedness, I think that's, yes, in some aspects that is part of the reason why he fades into the background at times.
Yeah.
But it's also the reason to be excited for him because of the two other D you mentioned, Elick and Emery. Yes, they have that one very high-end skill in skating and physicality, but you don't know if there's anything on the offensive side with those guys. It could seriously be like 10-point players, 15-point players at the NHL level, whereas you expect a little bit more out of a Badinka on that side.
Yeah, I kind of have him penciled in as like a 25-point guy. Maybe a career year gets to 35. Maybe if everything goes really horribly, it is a 15. But I think on average, I'm looking at 25 to 30 is where I think he should top out.
Okay. That's prospect number 1.
Prospect number 1.
Prospect number 2, we're going to Megan for.
I'll shift gears to a forward option, and it's been a difficult decision. It ultimately boiled down to, at 24, most of the defensemen that I really like in this draft class are most likely to not be available anymore. And
that's true.
What's left is an intriguing crop of forwards who I think still project NHL upside, each and every one of them available at 24. It's just the ceiling is a little bit more questionable for some of these.
Yep.
And what I think is interesting for the Avs position specifically is needing to graduate players and get NHL viability out of some of these picks, getting them to hit. And I know that's easier said than done. And so I think there's some element of wanting them to play it safe and pick a sure thing NHL player who is on a path to play a depth role but could play up in the lineup as needed. And that brought me to Jett Luchanko. I like his battle level at the faceoff dot and his fearlessness to drive inside ice and cut through traffic. You know, there's players I see excel in juniors that hang on the perimeter when they make the leap to the pro level. And seeing that in Luchanko's game gives me hope that that will translate pretty well. I like, too, a center option. You never know if he'll remain playing center when he makes the leap to the pro level. But I at least like that those odds, right? Like, he could still be effective on the wing. Another way that he's effective, too, is through his speed in his transition game, which also really suits the way that the Avs like to play. The other thing that I like about Luchanko that I feel makes him versatile is there are guys who have individual high-end skill, the kind of guys who go end-to-end or deke guys single-handedly. And Luchanko is a teammate. His offense is built around anticipating his teammates' habits and positioning himself in a way to complement them, distributing the puck to elevate them. And the ability to think outside of himself isn't easily taught, I think, to young players. And the player comp that isn't necessarily a player comp, but maybe a path that I hope that he could follow is Logan O'Connor with a higher ceiling. Because when it comes to the Avs needing to fill out their middle to bottom six, I think they can always find players through free agency that are going to be cost effective. But I'd like to see them internally produce a product like that who, like Logan O'Connor, can play up in the lineup as needed. And that's the high end that I expect then for a player like Luchanko, is to hang in the middle six, to be more of a third line player who could flex up onto a second line one day. And the path to getting there doesn't need to be rushed. This is a player that already has habits in his game that are suited for a depth role, but I think that there's a higher ceiling to get a little bit more NHL upside from him one day. And I think that we've talked about it, right? High floor, but maybe the ceiling isn't so high. I think this was the right blend of those things when I'm looking at the other forwards that might be available at this time.
The thing that really sells me on Luchanko, and I think the three people on this podcast might be the highest on Luchanko anywhere in the country, to be honest.
We're very pro Jett Luchanko.
But Luchanko, in this range of 24 to 40 or whatever you want to call it, there are a lot of forwards that I look at that might have decent top speeds, that might have decent skating, but Luchanko has that explosiveness where he can beat you with those first two steps that is bordering unnecessary to be effective offensively in the NHL. And it's really that gives me a little bit more hope for his ceiling. The rest of his game, I mean, defensively, he is far and away the best forward, in my opinion, at 24. So if you're looking for a defensive side forward, it has to be Luchanko to me. I understand he's not the biggest guy in the world. He's not going to run around and crush people, but mentally, his 200-foot game is far more advanced than many of the players in this draft. So,
and how easy is it to look at and say, Cal Ritchie is your 2C in 3 years?
Yeah.
And Jett Luchanko is your 3C.
Yep.
You're cost effective. You're young. You're still pretty good. You know, that's obviously a best situation, the best case scenario there. But with Luchanko, like, the guy has Av just written all over him. Like, we all looked at Jett Luchanko and we're like, that's an Av. He's really great at what he does.
Yep.
And he adds a right shot option down the middle. If he is to stay there, that I think the Avs value having a little bit of that variety down the middle.
I do think Luchanko will stick at center.
I think he's going to get every opportunity to fail there first.
My one concern, not sure his shot is good enough to really be effective at the NHL level.
Yeah.
We've seen other players like Jean-Luc Foudy type that have struggled to find roles with a lack of finishing a little bit in a bottom six style. But if his defense can carry him, it's easy to see that high floor with him.
Well, and I like his willingness to go. to inside ice. I think that's what held Foodie back early on. Foodie had the high-end skating and the skill that translated at juniors, but played a little bit too much on the outside for his first 2 pro years. I feel like Luchanko won't have that problem. I think he's kind of fearless.
Yep. You have to be. You have to be willing to do some of that to make that jump. And I absolutely think Luchanko can. I know some lists have him a little bit deeper than around that 24 area, but would not be surprised to see that kid go in the first round. So, third up, we have me, which I'm actually, I want to change my pick.
Great.
And this is one that at first I did not love this player, but the more I watched him, the more I got into the little details of his game, I've really come around on him, and that's Boisvert.
That's exactly the name I'm looking at right now. And I had a similar path with him.
I still think he's probably a winger at the NHL level, but I think that's okay. Particularly for the Avalanche, I don't think they'll have a big problem with that. It's depending on what they do with Middlestat, depending on how they feel about him. They have some options at center. But where Boisvert separates for me is, one, where the Avs are picking at 24, all of the high-end power forwards are going to be gone. You're not going to see a Cole Eiserman fall that far. You're not going to see some of these guys get to 24. But Boisvert can provide that power forward style of player, and he's not some of these guys like a Jekko who's just big and you're hoping to teach him how to play big. Boisvert actually has the willingness to drive the net, to use some of that physicality that he has. And what really, as I watched him more and more, sold me on him is he understands how to use that physicality on the boards and win battles at the level that he's at. And that's something that in that style of player is absolutely necessary at the next level. And then you combine that with the guy who, if you're picking at 24, he might be the guy with the best shot left on the board. The dude can score in the offensive zone. Not just, I went to the net front and bang home rebounds. No, he has a legitimately good shot that can beat goaltenders from even out high in the zone. Is he the perfect power forward? No, but you're not going to get that at 24.
Yeah.
You're not going to get a complete player who's super solid defensively all the time and can really fly up and down the ice. Not that his skating is bad. It's not. But to me,
it's awkward.
There are a lot of guys, like you mentioned, that have clunky strides.
Yeah.
I don't mind it with him because his foot speed isn't terrible. We've seen plenty of players make it work because their feet are good enough, even if their actual mechanics aren't the best.
Yeah, there's that difference between quickness and speed.
Yep.
And I think, if you like him, then you think that the quickness will translate and it won't be a problem.
Yep.
I went the opposite way with Boisvert than the two of you, where I started out really liking him, and then I'm lower on him than I was, but I'm not into the territory of like, oh, I don't like the player. It's just, I think my only issue is his fit as an Av is where I question it, because he's not. If he sticks at center, I'm good. I'm there. I'm with it.
I really don't mind him at wing.
If he moves over to wing, my interest. This is the same for Luchanko. My interest goes down a little bit.
I agree on Luchanko.
But with Luchanko, if he's a wing, you know that stylistically he's still going to be an Av.
Yep.
The way that he plays the game, he's still going to be there. And with Boisvert, I don't know. He feels kind of like a Minnesota Wild, like it just. I'm glad you like him, though.
You know who else feels like a Minnesota Wild in that sense? Arturi Lehkonen.
All right.
And I don't, for the record,
Don't need to be mean.
Arturi Lehkonen has lifted himself into a top 6 game with a production level that is impressive. I'm not quite sure that Boisvert has that high of a ceiling. But stylistically, if that's a guy that you get to round out his defensive game, and not even like super intelligent, but just a motor, if he can learn that NHL caliber motor where you're out there giving everything every shift,
yeah,
it's a guy who will play in the NHL. I guarantee it.
Yeah, I mean, you have to like certainly the size and the shooting and the willingness to engage physically.
Yep.
The engagement's a little inconsistent, but There's so much to like about his game. And an unconventional path,
For sure.
which I always like just because I think it's cool.
The shot alone, I think, will cause intrigue, and I could see him going before 24.
Me
but
too.
Near and around that number. And that's where he elevated in my mock draft board, too, is a little bit before 24. That's not where he began, though, to your earlier point. And the skating was the big concern that held me back on him.
Yep.
But there's defensive awareness that he possesses that I like to see in young players. That's part of the willingness, too, not just being physical, but being physical in a smart way that helps the team. And I think he's also a pretty skilled handler. And you want that in your forward no matter what, too. But capable passer. I think that there's maybe some offensive upside that some of these other power forward prototypes haven't fully tapped into. There's more for him to grow in that right as well.
And that's what really sold me on him. My other pick at this point was going to be Andrew Basha, who, don't get me wrong, I really like. But I just don't quite see the offensive upside that I see in someone like a Boisvert, if Boisvert is still there at 24. Yeah.
Yeah, he can't shoot. And if his speed isn't winning battles for Basha,
Yep.
you don't know what to do.
He creates a lot off the rush, which is great, but also limiting.
As you get into higher levels, you don't get as many rush chances. So how are you impacting the game?
Yep.
And with Basha, it's fair to wonder how that develops.
I still like Basha for what it's worth.
Yeah.
He's right in this range, and
Honestly, there's a
speed
list
is
of like 10 guys
Yep.
where I'm just like, any one of these
Would
guys
be happy at
I'd be
24.
happy with. There's a big list of guys I'd be fine with, and there's not very many guys where I would be like, I really don't like this.
There are really only 3 players in that range that I think I would not be happy with the Avs taking. I was just going to say we won't get into those in this video.
That's
but
not what this one's about.
I felt like you were teeing it up.
No, maybe we'll do another video on that one. But these were our top 3.5 call it prospects for the Avs at 24. Go check out our entire draft guide over on the DNVR.com, where you can see all of those prospects we were alluding to and what their potential fits are in Colorado. And then be sure to watch all of our draft coverage. We'll be live for both days 1 and 2. And go check it out. We appreciate y'all. We'll see you in the next video.
We all silly like the mayor.